Jana sighed, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth despite herself. You're a cheapskate, Jack Tripper, but I suppose we need the rent money more than a customized cake. Besides, Jay is almost Jana if you squint. She touched her neck, her fingers searching for a familiar weight that wasn't there. Jack, have you seen my cameo? Jack's face fell slightly, his playful demeanor softening. The one your grandmother gave you. I had to hawk it 3 months ago for rent money, Jana admitted quietly, her voice tinged with regret. I was hoping I could save up enough to get it back. But the heavy moment was interrupted by a sharp, rhythmic knock. Stanley Roper stood at the door, looking profoundly uncomfortable, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He pulled Jack aside into the hallway, away from the girls. Tripper, I want to talk to you, Stanley barked. Do you enjoy being here? In this apartment? Yeah, it's fine, Mr. Roper. We love their charm. And the leaks, Jack added under his breath. I was wondering, did you ever take out a girl before? Stanley asked, squinting suspiciously as if Jack might be hiding a secret girlfriend in the closet. I mean, it's not against the rules for you fellas, is it? Your religion or whatever. Jack suppressed a laugh, realizing Stanley was still operating under the assumption that Jack was safe. My religion. Well, I suppose I could go bowling with a girl. Or a ball game. Terrific, Stanley said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a crumpled $50 bill. It looked like it had been through a war of its own. $50. I want you to take my niece Karen out tonight. Show her the town. Take her dancing the way you kids dance nowadays. You don't even have to touch her. Just keep her away from the weirdos. Jack hesitated. He looked back into the apartment where Jana and Chrissy were setting the table for a birthday dinner he had promised to cook. Mr. Roper, I'd love to, but it's Jeanette's birthday. I've got a cake, well, half a cake and a dinner planned. $50, Tripper, think of the rent, Stanley whispered. Just then, Karen walked out of the Ropers' apartment. She was stunning, with dark hair and a vibrant smile that seemed to light up the dingy hallway. She wore a simple dress that caught the light, and her eyes sparkled with a New York confidence that immediately bypassed Jack's safe persona. $50, and I get to use your car? Jack asked, his eyes widening. Anything to get Mrs. Roper off my back, Stanley muttered. Jack turned to his roommates, his loyalty momentarily wavering under the pressure of financial need and the sight of Karen. I'll be back in time for the party, I promise. Just take the dinner out of the stove in 20 minutes, he shouted as he disappeared down the stairs with Karen. Chapter 3, The Night of the Radiator. The date began with high hopes and a low-functioning engine. Stanley's car, a vintage relic that smelled of old cigars and oil leaks, hummed with the threat of mechanical failure. The interior was cramped, and every time they hit a bump, the suspension groaned in protest. They were barely 10 miles out on the freeway when a plume of white steam erupted from the hood, obscuring the windshield and forcing Jack to swerve onto the shoulder. "I think your uncle's car just gave up the ghost," Jack said, coughing as he stepped out into the cloud of steam. Karen leaned back against the vinyl seat, remarkably unbothered. She seemed to enjoy the absurdity of the situation. Typical. Uncle Stanley thinks anything made after the war is a dangerous novelty. So, Jack, tell me, how does a guy like you end up living with two girls like Jeanne and Chrissy? Is it a cult? A commune? Jack fumbled with the radiator cap, using his shirt as a rag to avoid the scalding steam. He felt the sweat sticking his hair to his forehead. "Oh, we're just roommates. It's a modern arrangement. Very platonic. Very safe. I'm just a third of the rent and the guy who knows how to make a decent omelet." Karen watched him through the open window, a knowing smirk on her face. "Safe? That's the word my uncle keeps using. But you don't act like a man who's been living with two women and has no interest in them. You act like a man who's trying very hard to be safe." "Well," Jack stammered, feeling the heat of the engine or perhaps the intensity of Karen's gaze rising in his cheeks. "Every man's entitled to a night off, isn't he?" "Not on my time," Karen whispered, leaning closer to the window. The hours on the freeway stretched into the late night. Jack struggled with the radiator, getting grease on his hands and oil on his face. By the time they limped back to the apartment complex, the moon was high and the streets were silent. Upstairs, Jeanne and Chrissy had already finished the J cake, their mood souring with every passing hour of Jack's absence. "He's a fink," Jeanne muttered, stabbing a piece of cake with a fork. "A great cook, a watchdog, and a total, absolute fink. He stood us up for a girl he just met." When Jack finally walked Karen to her door, the exhaustion of the night had stripped away some of his usual guard. They stood close in the dim hallway, the air thick with the kind of tension that Stanley had paid $50 to prevent. Stanley, of course, was waiting in the shadows. He saw them, he saw the closeness, and his worldview shattered. Out, Stanley roared, bursting from his apartment like a jack-in-the-box. "Tripper, you're a wolf in sheep's clothing. I saw what you were doing. You were acting. Normal. That's sick. Pack your bags. Leave this building." The eviction was only averted when Karen, feeling the weight of the night's drama, admitted she had practically attacked the poor, disinterested Jack. Stanley, relieved that his world was still right side up, apologized. "It's okay now. I told her all about Jack. The fairy story. Jack has his rights, just like any other minority. I'm sorry I got heated, Tripper. But the real magic happened back in apartment 201. Jack walked in, looking like he'd been through a war, and handed Jeanne a small velvet box. Inside was her grandmother's cameo, He had spent the $50 from Stanley and the rest of his savings